James, sorry I'm late. I've gotten to the popcorn counter. It's just I was running late, and I ran all the way to here, so I'm a little out of breath. What's up? What's up with you? Is that your necklace in your what's in your mouth? Ooh. James, are you gagged? Let me. Wait.
Oh, gee! Thank God for that. I've been waiting for you to come. I've been gagged for the last 7 days.
What's that?
Welcome to the popcorn counter here at the Two Real Cinema Club. The popcorn counter they could not silence, although they tried to. I am James Ruzika.
I'm Andres Laurenti. You're so good to introduce yourself formally after being gagged like that. What a professional.
Well, I'd already introduced myself 5 times, so I don't think anybody could understand what I was saying. So we have been, I feel like this is going to be one of those podcasts where there is a YouTube thumbnail of us wearing gags and shaking our fists at a large Google symbol or something like that. Exciting story. We've been censored about a week ago. Do you want to explain what happened?
What a week.
Yes, what a week. Very sort of exciting. I feel like this is like the beginning of some kind of big YouTube beef or maybe pending legal action.
Let's change the name of the organization who censored us to Poo Boob. I think that's better than saying the other one. I'm actually scared to tell the story because I feel like I'm the one who's going to get us in trouble again. It seems to always be me who gets censored or
that figures,
or silenced. But it comes at a time, and it's interesting because there's a sort of a satellite event that happened too. I believe one of our ads was recently censored a little bit too. The Concubots did not quite get their full play, but
that's because we had a Concubots advert during the most child-friendly episode of the podcast.
So
yeah,
we are actually starting to experience some censorship, I believe. I received an email from YouTube, which I thought was a phishing scam. But I followed the scam a little bit, and against the advice of my wife, who also thought it was just a ruse, just a fakery, just a bit of little AI trickery. So they actually told me first, or wrote to me first, to say that we had violated their censorship policies, and I think under inciting violence or terrorism or something like that. It was really quite odd. So I thought, I think
that sounds exactly like our podcast. Yes,
yeah, it might have been the two Kalishnikov podcast, not the Two Real Cinema Club.
There was that podcast where we explained how to make a bomb. You're right.
Yeah, so we have to be very careful. But it was all about Oppenheimer. We did a podcast where we compared, I think, Oppenheimer to Dr. Strangelove, was it? Yeah.
Yes. So in fact, there were kind of 2 podcasts, or a podcast about how to make a bomb.
Yes. And they were this was a year and a half later. So it seems like, I don't think it was a human who trolled our archives, but maybe a bot. And apparently it is my fault. I was quoting from it was an ancient Sanskrit text. Was it the Bhagavad Gita or something like that? But it's a text that is quoted in the film. And it might even appear on screen. I've tried to block out a lot of Oppenheimer, to be honest with you, but I remember that it was
that's the safest way. Yes.
Yeah, it was explicitly in the film, and all I did was repeat the quote on air at 7 minutes 50 seconds into the pod. So it was pretty early in the pod, which is interesting also. But that moment violated their policies, and then sure enough, you're allowed to sort of challenge it. I guess you can file a complaint. And so I immediately wrote back to them and said, I think you've made a mistake. This doesn't seem like us. If anything, you should probably pick a beef with Oppenheimer and the people who made it, because they put it in there, and their film was seen by millions, if not billions, compared to our podcast, which has a boutique, very loyal audience, but we are a small podcast, top 25 though. And I thought maybe this is an error. Maybe I could help point you to that. Now, you never know does a human get involved at that point, or is it still an AI? But they were right back. They said, well, 72 hours, we're going to get in touch with you. It was less than 24. They said, nope, we're right. You violated the policy, and watch yourselves.
So I think they say something like, if you go onto our kind of website, our own kind of creator channel, it says, I think you get 3 strikes, don't you? This is our first of 3 strikes. So they have removed the video.
Yes.
So you can go to the address and it's just a little black box now which says this video has been removed.
Yeah.
And if we violate their policy 2 more times, then they delete the entire channel, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm going to be very careful what I say from here on out. Not really, but I said that because I want them to hear that. I'm going to be careful, Pooh Boob.
We have to assume that this is AI based, because I can't believe that there is somebody at Google who is sitting down and listening to 18-month-old podcasts and raising objections. So it's either AI has scraped the podcasts and decided that by quoting ancient Sanskrit we are inciting violence. Yeah. The alternative is that it could be a rival podcast who's just trying to get us cancelled. So my first thought I went to is probably New York Times podcasts trying to get us out of the picture so they can dominate.
Yes. I like that.
But most likely, I wonder whether it is some form of ChatGPT trying to get their revenge for our disparaging podcast about ChatGPT about 2 years ago.
Yes.
It's one of those 3 anyway.
Yeah. I like to think that we've made a lot of friends making this podcast, but I think we've also earned some enemies.
That's when when you're getting powerful.
Yeah.
It did inspire me to have a little look at the history of censorship.
Oh, good.
At least in the UK. So last week when Anora was our topic of conversation, I was talking about how at the beginning of the movie, the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification, they're the guys who decide what certificate the film will get, and they also put a little explanation of why they have chosen that certificate. Strong sex was the argument for Anora. Right. But I did a little bit of research. So the BBFC were first created in 1912, so they've been around for well over 100 years. Originally, it was the British Board of Film Censorship. Their original job was to censor the nascent film industry. Local authorities in the UK had then and still have the final say, interestingly. So even if the BBFC say, we think that this film is suitable for families, or we think that this film shouldn't be shown, local authorities can still step in and say, no, we're going to show it, or no, we're going to ban it anyway. So they kind of published their 3 principles on which they based decisions in 1948. So the three things that they were judging films on, they would ask these 3 questions. They would say, is the story, incident or dialogue likely to impair the moral standards of the public by extenuating vice or crime or depreciating moral standards? I don't know whether Oppenheimer says yes to any of those questions. They'd say, is it likely to give offence to reasonably minded cinema audiences, and what effect would it have on children? And I think these are still sort of, in a way, a version of the questions that they still ask. So in 1954, I think they banned The Wild One because it was a spectacle of unbridled hooliganism.
Yeah.
In 1955, Rebel Without a Cause had to have substantial cuts and released as an X certificate. In 1956, they expressed worries that Rock Around the Clock would cause teenage criminality. That was released as an X certificate. All seems tremendously family friendly and not requiring much alarmism these days. I don't know how much teenage criminality Rock Around the Clock causes these days. In 1984, the UK government passed the Video Recordings Act, which meant that videos now, we're talking about the VHS era, last week, videos had to be classified by the Or Authority. So they changed their name then to the British Board of Film Classification instead of censorship. So interesting that 1984 was the year when they decided to drop the word censorship. Irony is alive and well. And then, interestingly, as far as Anora goes, like the big moment that kind of moved the needle, no pun intended, was 1991 in the UK. So before 1991, I think it was not possible to legally see an erect penis on screen in the UK. Which meant that there were all sorts of films, I think, which were just had the door slammed in their face or had to be widely cut to see any kind of UK release. And I think 1991 was when the first time when you could see an erection was, which was in it was a video cassette called The Lover's Guide, which was a kind of sort of a medical guide to having sex, which was the first time I think in the UK that you could legally see an erection. I can remember being like in the UK. It was so unusual to see an erect penis that I was, as a medical student, it would have been about 91, 92. I remember doing an attachment at a hospital. I won't say which hospital it was, where I was working, or at least I was studying under a urologist who was doing an operation for Peyronie's disease. You know what that is?
No.
Which is, so this is a disease of men where the penis grows some scar tissue, which means that it bends when you have an erection. I think allegedly Bill Clinton may have this or may have had this.
You've explained this to me before. I love that story.
And so so there was an operation where you can treat Peyronie's disease. Basically, you cut out the scar tissue, and it means that then your penis is a bit smaller, but at least it's straight. But the only way to treat it is that you have to medically induce an erection on the operating table. And it was so unusual to see an erect penis that there was virtually a crowd of medical students all standing in this theatre watching the operation.
Yeah.
There was it was a premium to get in and watch this operation, because otherwise people simply would not have seen an erect penis before. It was such an incredible novelty. Oh, look, that's what an erection looks like. Since 1991, obviously, the whole world has changed. So apparently the BBFC, they are now supposed to encourage classification for video on demand, although there is no obligation for video on demand providers to obey any of the BBFC's rules. So basically all bets are off now.
Yeah.
Where you used to have to go and either attend a cinema or buy a dusty video cassette. Now the internet means that there is kind of no enforceable form of classification or censorship that exists at all. And yet now suddenly I feel a little bit like we're back to square one. I feel like we're back to the Wild One in 1954 suddenly, with a spectacle of unbridled hooliganism, because now instead of it being a government-appointed body, we have I suppose, privately appointed committee and a YouTube-based AI, which will now decide fairly arbitrarily what to censor and what not to, what ideas are dangerous and what are not. And interestingly, we are dangerous.
Very. I think you've just earned us our second warning, so...
Yes, expect this. Listen to this one quick, because it's going to get withdrawn any minute now.
A lot of penis erection talk. And honestly, I'm glad you're the one who's going to be breaking the policy this time, because I feel like I've done too much damage. Wow. I happen to think that Oppenheimer's involved somehow, and I won't name any names over there, Mike Primer, because I think we were the only podcast who said anything negative about that film. We're the only people on the planet. So I feel like maybe the Oppenheimer people got in touch with YouTube and said, these guys have dirty words or dirty ideas and they need to be censored.
I think that history will prove us right, in the same way that history has not been particularly kind to the people who built the atomic bomb, maybe rightly so. Yeah. I think that the history of podcasts will in 20 years' time, we'll look back and say, those two guys got it right. Yep. Oppenheimer was overrated. What was everybody else thinking?
Yes, history will absolve us, as they say. I also think that maybe weak sex is more serious transgression than strong sex. So I think they might want to rethink that warning on Honora. Oh boy, for me, it's just such a terrible era that we're going into. It's just we're not even censoring ourselves. We're not going to do anything for ourselves. We're just going to let AI go out there and do it. And this is, we've got these ideas of AI taking over, or technology, or robots, and this is a little piece of that happening. If they're censoring us and telling us what's going to be on the internet and what's not, then we got some problems coming up.
As a Brit, the US notion of film classification and censorship seems really kind of upside down. insofar as I can remember, as a young man, being astonished that super violent movies like The Terminator or Rambo or whatever could be screened to small children.
Yeah.
If you're a preschooler, you could go and see those movies.
Yeah.
But if a nipple appeared in your movie, you were going to be NC-17 no matter what. Whereas, especially, the British are fairly prudish. If you go to France, then you'll see nipples on TV at any time of the day or night. It's considered completely normal.
Yeah.
Whereas the US attitude seems a complete inversion of that.
Yeah.
Violence is fine. Any kind of nudity is definitely verboten. But am I getting the correct impression? Has that been the case? Is it still the case?
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's a very ironic world over here in the sense that I think we're really uptight sexually, but then on screen you're seeing lots and lots more TNA and nudity, and yet there are these puritanical ideas about sexuality and the decency of nudity. So I mean, it's out there. It's very obvious. We've got a lot of that, but at the same time, we're very repressed about it all somehow. Like you can't, women breastfeeding in public is an absolute no-no in the United States, and it seems like
really?
Now they've got special closets and rooms for you to do it. Or, so it's just we are still deeply puritanical on one level, but at the same time, I think the capitalism, the commercialism, the idea of being able to make money off of naked bodies kind of wins out. But we're balancing this really difficult act between exposure and just hiding nudity. It's just strange. Yeah. So
historically, just talking about the difference between those 1950s films and the 1990s and today, generally historically the arrow of progress has been in the direction of being a little bit more permissive, and we have seen a little bit more sexuality, a little bit more nudity. But I wonder whether that arrow is going to start pointing back in the opposite direction again. Do you think we're going to see a future in 5 years' time where cinemas are going to be more censorious, where the stories that can be told, or the ways that they can be told, will be more puritanical rather than less?
I think in the short term probably. We're just these pendulum swings in history. And then again, AI has another role to play. You could almost, like, if you put up a CGI image of a nipple or an erect penis, does that count the same way? Like, this is not the actor's proper genitalia, not their own genitalia, but this is not their naked body. This is a CGI one. So I think you get into this fuzzy area of maybe now there's more animated nudity, or maybe that you can, just the way you make an actor look younger, maybe you can make them look less or more endowed, or less or more naked. Who knows? So I think we're entering a really weird era. I'm not too excited about it myself, but doesn't seem good to me. I mean, the fact that we are being censored is it's pathetic. It's just I think it's just a terrible sign. But I also think it's just showing how random it is, and it's just this could even be a test version of their AI over there, right? These are their test bots looking for infractions, and maybe the humans will, sort of take a look at some of the data and see that, oh boy, we've summoned 700,000 podcasts this month. Maybe it's a little bit too sensitive. So, I mean, we could just be in a testing stage. This is a beta version of the podcast scrubbing AI, and it's not going very well. So it could be anything. I just think all bets are off.
But there is a chance they might decide that the beta version is actually not censorious enough.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, could be it.
We'll turn on the computer tomorrow and find that actually half of our podcasts have all been eliminated.
I think it's a pretty good analysis of the whole AI. We just don't know what we're doing with it yet, but we're doing stuff with it anyway because people want to make the early buck on it, or try and be the first ones to have a product that they can sell to others, right? So I think it's not perfect yet. It's probably never going to be perfect, but it's good enough to serve someone's purpose, and that's why we're already using a faulty product.
Oh, good enough, isn't it? Yeah,
Yep.
You're exactly right. Yeah, good. In the same way that the thing they will write on my gravestone is "that will do." Yes, the marketing slogan for AI really should be good enough, good enough, and cheaper than people.
Yep.
Yep. Oh well, welcome to the brave new 2025.
Yeah.
We're a quarter of the way into the new century, and I think we may be establishing the trend that we might see for the next 100 years. Yes. Oh, great.
Yeah. Well, at least you don't have the actual gag in your mouth. It's just a virtual gag. Ooh, gag is also a joke, right? You're a comedian.
Yes.
You get a gag in your mouth.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, I see. I like to end on a pun. That's much better. Yeah.
I don't think AI does puns.
If it was only a pun, it wouldn't chafe quite so much. I've got sore ears now from where they tied that so tight.
Yeah.
At least now that I can use my mouth, I can eat popcorn.
Yes. Oh, let's get some popcorn.
And we're going to go see some beavers.
Yeah, let's go see some beavers.
I can only imagine the AI warming its hands on the thought of censoring our beaver conversation in a week's time. Oh, yes.
This podcast never sees the light of the internet. I let it tell you.